Good afternoon or good morning if you're in the US like today's speaker. I'm Karen Doyle, Operations Director of CTAM Europe. Welcome to you all and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm happy to introduce you to today's presenter, Christian Kurz, SVP Global Streaming Research and Insights at Paramount. Christian's based in New York. He'll be presenting and sharing some recent research of theirs titled The Next Normal. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. I'll let Christian tell you more in his intro. We're scheduled today for 45 minutes, which includes time for a Q&A session at the end. Please do get involved and post your questions by using the Q&A button. As always, the recording of this presentation will be posted on the members only section of ctameurope.com. If you're not a current member, please email info@ctameurope.com for more details. Our members have access to a monthly webinar, a live annual symposium and networking events, and also webinars and podcasts from our colleagues across the pond at CTAM US. I'll follow up by email in the next couple of days again, as well as today, regarding our annual executive management program, which we host at INSEAD every year, which is a business school in France. Registration is open and seats are selling pretty fast. So I will switch myself off now and hand you over to Christian. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fine day. As Karen just said, my name is Christian Kurz, and I head up research and insights for the streaming business of Paramount, Paramount, a Skydance corporation, following our merger. And what I am talking to you about today is the Next Normal 2025, which interestingly has very little to do with streaming, very little to do with media altogether. It really is just much more around consumers' outlook on life and the world in a very broad context. I'll talk a little bit more about why and where we came from with this in a second, but before that, I'm sure everybody knows by now, but Paramount is home to brands ranging from our cable brands, Nickelodeon, MTV, Comedy Central, BET, through our free-to-air properties, CBS in the US, Network 10 in Australia, Channel 5 in the UK, as well as, of course, the Paramount Picture Studios, the Skydance Studio, Skydance Animation and Games, and of course, our streaming businesses, Paramount Plus in the SVOD space and Pluto TV in the free streaming FAST space. And we support all of these brands through various elements of research, one of which, going back to 2012, is really just around understanding our audiences and our consumers as a whole. So back in 2012, we launched The Next Normal, at that point, an unprecedented look at millennials worldwide, so an age group of under 30s at that time. And we started measuring really the thoughts, the feelings, hopes, and fears of people around the world since then. We did a new version of that in 2017, and then today I'm presenting you the most recent results of this work as well. We've also put in comparisons to some of those years, as well as to some other work that we did in 2016, particularly around home and some Gen X work where we're comparing things as well. So really what this is all about is looking at the changing attitudes about happiness, stress, what it means to be successful to consumers and audiences, the sources of identity, their personal relationships. And we have now broadened that age group to 18 to 64-year-olds, which is what we're looking at today. We're making comparisons in two different ways. So we're comparing today versus what this looked like in 2017, 2016, and 2012. But we're also sometimes looking at, well, what do 30-year-olds today think about this versus 30-year-olds 10 years ago? I'll make that clear when we're looking at various comparisons. We cover 10 countries in this work today, including a bunch of European ones, as you can see on here. And we spoke to about 1,000 respondents in each market, looking across how they feel and how they think about everything. Now, going back to 2017, when we did the last big wave of this specific work, you know that a lot of things have happened since then in various places around the world. There's been a lot of political developments that have happened in various ways. There's also been a lot of environmental, natural disaster type developments that have happened. There's been a lot of technological environments in 2017. I never thought I'd be talking about generative AI on a daily basis. And then also, as many of you will, of course, remember, in 2020, there was this event called COVID, which had fundamental impacts on how people think about their lives and their outlook and their health and various things. And what we're seeing today is partly formed by all of those things that have evolved over the years. And some of those are very easy to explain and very easy to find reasons for, some of them less so. But nonetheless, all of these things will have had a fundamental impact on how people think about the world themselves and themselves in the world and their life. So really the question is, how is uncertainty affecting people? Because if there's one thing that is universally true and that cannot be argued with, is that we're living in much more uncertainty today than we did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And uncertainty keeps creeping in across the board in all of the countries in various ways, constantly and consistently. One of the biggest things that is continuing to happen is that people feel less safe than they did 5 years ago, subjectively so. This question is not a comparison to a survey from 5 years ago. This is a very straight up, do you feel more or less safe than you did 5 years ago? So this is a very straight up question. Therefore, this is not objective safety and security. This is subjective. How do I feel about this? And we're seeing very clearly that about half of the population in each of those countries are feeling less safe than they did 5 years ago. Now, there's a big difference between the objective nature of that and the subjectiveness, but really what shapes your life and your outlook on life is your subjective feeling, right? It is how you feel about things like that. And feeling less safe is certainly one of those things that is coming through here. In addition to safety, money is the number one concern that is coming through when we're asking people, what do you worry about a lot or a little? And that money thing is very clearly partly driven by an economic uncertainty or instability or, I don't know, cost of living crisis, call it what you will. There's clearly something happening in the economy in general that is driving people to think more about financial concerns. Followed that is by the health and safety of my parents, my own mental well-being, being safe myself. We talked about that already. And then we're back to an economic concern of unemployment. So if you look about not having enough money and unemployment together, 2 out of the top 5 things here are to do with finance, and the other 3 are to do with health and safety. Which is very interesting, and it's an interesting combination of where we're seeing some things evolve. About half of 18 to 64s globally do not feel comfortable financially today. And of course, that shapes their outlook in various ways. 8 out of 10 feel anxious about their financial future. Again, this is consistent across the board. And we're seeing really, really high percentages for every one of those markets. In addition, we also find that a number of adults are considering financial security the most important thing in life right now. And that number has doubled since 2016. So in 2016, 19% thought that financial security was the most important thing for right now. Today, we're standing at 40% of that. So that's a really, really massive increase in only 10 years. And we're clearly seeing outflows of that. So things are evolving and are changing. As we mentioned, fear of unemployment ranks among the top 5 concerns for adults globally. While some of this anxiety is driven by the threat of redundancy, it is also really tied to the increasing use of AI and technology in the workplace, as we're seeing here, which many fear could render jobs obsolete. So additionally, on top of that, there is also a growing apprehension about the impact of the next generation of workers entering the job market. So all 3 of those things are conspiring, if you will, to create a level of uncertainty that we haven't seen in a long time. And that big arrow in the background that we see here, this is the first time where we're showing that, is where we're seeing what we're using to indicate that all of these numbers have significantly increased versus the last time when we looked at that, which was in 2016 for these three. And you're seeing these arrows throughout the deck. We're not necessarily putting the absolute numbers on the slide because they're not really meaningful. What is really meaningful is that the direction of travel is going in that direction, so up in this case. And we're also seeing that direction of travel across markets, across genders, across age groups. It is all very, very consistent, which is why we're not calling it out. If there are differences by age or country, that is when we're showing it. So work instability really feeds this financial anxiety, and it's coming through here. That also then makes sense that financial security has increased as a focus on what we're thinking about when what is important to me. Job satisfaction is going down. So having plenty of money becoming more important since the last time we looked, having a fulfilling job being less important since the last time we looked. Now both of those are about even, but they used to be very different. And actually, if you go back all the way to 2012, it's very interesting because 2012, as many of you remember, not that far away from a global financial crisis that happened in 2007, 8, 9. And financial insecurity and financial focus was much higher in 2012. It then went down and dropped into 2017, where having a fulfilling job and self-actualization became quite important. And now in 24, 25, we're really flipping that around again with having plenty of money and that financial security becoming much, much more important again. So we're really seeing this, it's almost taking you back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have enough to eat, that's your number one priority. If you do, then you need a roof over your head. And if you do have that, then you start thinking about self-actualization and fulfillment in various ways, right? So we're seeing that focus on basics is coming through very, very loudly with adults of all ages across all of the countries that we looked at. And given that widespread concern about money, as well as health and personal safety that we've already talked about briefly, it's really not surprising that the number of adults reporting very high levels of stress has also surged since 2017. Now, almost 1 in 2 people globally say they feel high levels of stress, which is up 29% from 2017. So this is, again, really, really important and really high increases across the board and across all of the countries that we look at. But although stress levels are up, people do think they are managing their anxiety fairly well, with 7 out of 10 claiming that they're good at dealing with stress. Well, thank good for that, because if they weren't, or if we weren't, or if we didn't think we were good at dealing with stress, that level of stress would basically lead to paralysis very, very quickly. So we're seeing that across the board, people feel that they're good at dealing with stress. Those 3 blue arrows for Brazil, France, and Italy indicate that in those 3 markets particularly, people actually feel they're getting better at dealing with stress than they were last time we looked in 2017. So this is really, really high numbers across the board and tendentially still increasing in various ways. Now, to manage stress, people take comfort in many things. Among them, in music, in loved ones, in solitude, content, and staying active as well. So what we're seeing here, the white ones have been there and have remained there. So listening to music has always been important and continues to be so. Being with my family and my partner has been important. Spending time by myself has been important and always will be, as well as eating and snacking. What we are seeing increasing is the importance of entertainment activities, right? So this is where that matters to all of us here. Watching a movie, watching a TV show have made it into the top 10 of how do I manage stress, which is important. Spending time with friends, also more important, and more important since the pandemic when you couldn't. Exercising, also increasing in importance, partly because of my physical health focus, partly again because that was kind of difficult for a year or 2 years in various things. Same is true for outdoor activities. And then pets have started to play a much more important role for a lot of people during lockdown periods and in 2020, 21, 22. Therefore, now playing with pets has also become a much more important part of how I deal with various things. Now, if something goes up, something else has to go down. And activities that are becoming less important is some unhealthy activities like smoking becoming much less important. Now, unfortunately, some of that is being offset by vaping, which we didn't show because it's in the middle, but vaping didn't virtually exist and has come up quite significantly, making up for some of that decrease in smoking. Now, music, while listening to music remains the number one way of dealing with stress, watching music videos has become significantly less important as a way of boosting my mood. And again, that is something that as an industry we're starting to think about. Then on top of that, we also have a lot of in-home activities becoming less important. And part of that is because we believe that if you're forced to spend a significant period of time indoors, and that is all you can do, then as soon as you don't have to just have those options anymore, you start looking elsewhere, right? So entertaining at home becoming much less important. I'm more likely to try and entertain outside the home, which I wasn't able to do. Reading a book or a magazine, something I'm limited to, becoming less important. Online shopping was fantastic when that was a choice. When that is the only shopping you could do, that loses its shine very quickly. So online shopping as a way of boosting your mood becoming less important. You still do it as a necessity, but you're not doing it to change your mood. And then also playing with my kids. Again, if you're cooped up in your own house for 2 years and have nothing else to do but playing with your kids and keeping them busy, then that becomes less of a priority to boost your own mood. Again, you're doing that absolutely, and it's not going away. However, you're looking at different activities to boost your mood, to change your mind, and to care for yourself, if you will. Now, through all this anxiety, people are reportedly feeling less excited about the future. 37% of adults feel very or mostly excited about the future, which is 14% down from what it was in 2016. So fewer people are feeling excited about their future, and we're seeing this decline across all of the countries. So partly to deal with life stresses, we're seeing this coming through in their outlook on the future. And that brings us to the big question of, well, how are people responding to all of this stuff? And they're really responding in two different ways. There's a little bit more of an inward focus. And then secondly, people are thinking much more short term. I'm going to talk about both of those, starting with a section on the more inner focus around consumers. So in 2017, we had already seen trust levels on the decline from 2012. So trust levels were already on their way down. And now more recently, overall trust levels have dropped very, very sharply. Mom still holds the top spot as the most trusted individual. And by the way, regardless of age, mom is the most trusted individual. Even trust in mom has fallen significantly. People now place less trust in their families, in their romantic partners, in themselves, and very, very much so in institutions. Trust in institution is down like crazy. And you see that by even the fact that on this list of top 10, no institute, well, doctor, I guess, is an institution, but beyond that, there are no institutions here at all. So there has been significantly less trust. Trust really has been shaken across the board. This downturn in trust might partly also be behind something else that we've seen, which is a decreasing number of close friends. In 2012, it was even higher than in 2017, but in 2017, people said they had an average of 5 best friends. And now we're standing at just under 3, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 best friends, which is clearly significantly increasing. And potentially an outcome of that decrease in trust levels. But people are also increasingly worrying less about what other people think of them in general, right? So we see that here with agreement to statements like, I worry about what other people think, I worry about making my parents happy, I worry about making my partner happy. All of those numbers significantly down over time. Now, this doesn't mean that they don't care. As we saw earlier, concerns about their parents' health and safety risk are second only to those financial worries. Rather than not caring, it's really a shift towards focus on what's within our control. Recognizing that at times, making other people happy simply isn't something that I can control. So it truly is focusing in on that inward focus of what is within my realm of possibilities, within my control. That is what I focus on. And then if that makes other people happy, that's great. But if it doesn't, then I'm not going to beat myself up over it, because there's very little that I can do. This is very little within my control. That said, maintaining good mental health is absolutely seen as essential. And this is something that we didn't even ask about in 2012. So the concept itself of mental health has made fundamental strides over these years. And now mental health is absolutely seen as essential, with just under 90%, even in Germany, thinking that this is a really important thing. Everywhere else, it's well over 90%. And very, very similar agreement scales across the board. When asked about what is the most important thing in life, the top 3 items on the list are my own physical and mental health, as well as financial security. Health and financial security both increase significantly in importance. And mental health, as I said, we didn't even ask about even a few years ago. And it made it into number 3 right away. So the good physical and mental health, as well as stable finances, are really seen as the most important thing for anyone right now. Following close behind, we have finding a good work-life balance, or really the way that consumers are expressing it is almost a life-work balance, with the emphasis on life, and having time to relax. Those are becoming increasingly important, but the work-life balance in the context of having a job at all is more important than the right work-life balance. But once I have a job, that is one of my main priorities as part of that. We're seeing both of those things increase meaningfully and significantly. Again, that focus on the mental health being really important as part of all of those things. So that was all about the focus inward. Now flipping to think about, well, what's that more short-term focus? And really, when we say short-term, this is not about the YOLO, you only live once type mentality. This is really trying to focus on what I can see. It's an acknowledgement of the fact that there is very little into the future I can control. So just like I can't control how other people feel around me, I also can't control what's happening in a month's time. And therefore, let me focus in on the things that I can control, which is a much more short-term focus here. So I am focused on the present rather than the long term. Again, we believe that there's been implications from COVID, which was out of the control of anyone. And therefore, I can't make plans, or I couldn't at the time. So therefore, I'm a bit more focused now on, well, what can I control? And today is what I can control. Even tomorrow is partly out of my reach. So I care more about living for the moment than planning for the future. 2/3 of consumers agreeing with that. That is a 22% increase since 2016. And these increases are, again, across the board, and agreement to that statement very, very high. Interestingly, English language markets are at the bottom of the scale here, but overall, very, very high agreement across the board. Success is more about happiness and balance in life than it has been in the past. And being surrounded by the right people has become more important to consumers. So we have fewer less friends. We're surrounding ourselves with fewer people, but it is more important for those to be the right people for me, which again speaks to this whole idea. I worry less about what people think about me. I worry about what the right people think of me. and surrounding myself with the right people is important here. This, of course, also plays into this whole idea of echo chambers and finding your own community within the social circles or the world or various things, right? So there is a bit of duality to this. Some of that is good, some of that is a bit concerning. But all in all, we're seeing that consumers believe that they want to surround themselves with the right people, and that has increased. While three of the other four here, being happy, being part of a loving family, having a job you enjoy, are becoming less important as signs of success for consumers. Beyond the top five, success is increasingly defined by autonomy and controlling whatever you can, right? So, what is within my own control? Owning my own home is within my control and is becoming more important. Being well traveled, and again, there's an element of revenge travel here, is more important than to consumers. Being in control of whatever in itself there, and then we have material stuff coming through again, like being rich, having a nice car. We saw those things very important in 2012, less so in 2017, and they're coming back in now as that expression of financial stability and financial safety. Even more important than in the past, home is seen as a safe haven that is central to people's identities. You saw on the earlier slide, owning my home being much more important, but it isn't just the physical home. Yes, the physical home matters, and home is my sanctuary from the outside world. Agreement to that, even versus 2020, is up significantly, right? We did, particularly for home, we did a piece of work in 2020 that looked at that for obvious reasons. And even versus then, home as a sanctuary of the outside world become more important now. And home is an essential part of who I am. Being both the physical home, where people are spending a lot more time decorating that again. It is, if you go back to your teenage years, the posters on your walls are an expression of who you are. That is becoming more important again, physical manifestations of who you are, but also home as a non-physical element, as a metaphysical element, really important. We talked to consumers, one of whom said, listen, I travel with my pillow everywhere I go because wherever I sleep, wherever I put down my head, if I have that pillow with me, it feels with home and it surrounds me with that bubble of safety and that sense of sanctuary around. So home, incredibly important. And of course, as entertainment providers, we are in this incredibly luxurious position or fortunate position that we are invited into consumers' homes on a daily basis, right? So we have a level of trust. We have a level of opportunity to engage with consumers at their most vulnerable space, which is, of course, something that we need to be very aware of, not squander, and think about as we go about our businesses across the board. Now, in that world full of turmoil, home is that place of refuge. Consumers feel safe, they can relax, they can feel comfortable, they feel loved, and they feel at ease. Again, part of that, we are having the opportunity to work with consumers as being invited into their home through our various entertainment offerings, which is, of course, very important. Now, as people focus more on their home lives, the bond with local communities has also grown. And consumers say they feel connected with their local community. Helping people in my community has increased meaningfully. Surrounding myself with tighter communities, sometimes those are physical spaces and local things. Sometimes those are different types of communities. But focusing in on what I can control is more important. Now, the flip side of that is that, unfortunately, with that focus on the local community, interest in the rest of the world is declining and declining meaningfully. Consumers say it is less important to follow world events and it is significantly less important to make a difference in the world as a whole, which brings you back to control. I can't control what happens in my country or in the world, We've seen the reemergence of wars in various places that have shattered a sense of safety and security in a number of consumers, particularly across Europe. And as partly a reaction to that, I'm focusing on the things I can control. I'm focusing in on my local community, what I can do in various ways and various places. Now, what does all of that mean for people's happiness and their self-perception? So we've seen that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, which is leading to increased worries around personal safety, finances, family, health. But we've also seen steps that people are taking to respond to these challenges. So how are people balancing this? How is all of this coming out in the end? Well, the interesting thing is that it does seem to be balancing out. We are seeing that 7 in 10 consumers are ranking themselves as being happy. And this number is incredibly flat. There has been no change over the years. 7 out of 10 consumers consider themselves to be happy or reasonably happy. And in the light of stress levels have gone up, they really are coping or dealing with that stress very well to bring happiness levels back to where they were, even as far back as 2012. They're also finding an inner strength with their self-confidence and their adaptability intact. So I feel confident in making decisions. I feel comfortable with who I am. And I describe myself as flexible to adapt to change quickly, which, by the way, objectively, as a human race, we have been able to adapt quickly to change because otherwise 2020 would not have gone the way that it did. I feel confident in making decisions. Again, that harks back to, and I care less about what other people think about me because I feel comfortable with who I am, right? So all of these things are working together really well. And people are finding their voice to stand up for their beliefs. 90% say that they stand up for what they believe in. And again, that shows a certain self-confidence that we're coming through here. And then lastly, people are increasingly believing that there is no one that is going to stop them from achieving their life goals. So in a world where there's a lot of depressing stuff happening, and let's be honest, for many people, it looks like the world is on fire, or in that dumpster fire that the world seems to be, I want to do something, then no one is going to stop me, right? So that's really what's coming through. Despite all of the depressing numbers and those negative elements and events that we've lived through and that I just talked about for basically 30 minutes, consumers are confident that they can do what they set their mind to. And again, we're seeing agreement with that in all markets, less so in Northern Europe and some of the Anglo markets. But in general, we're still seeing very high agreement. Which brings me to my couple of summary slides. So get your questions ready if you have any. What really I've been talking about here across the board is that amidst this global uncertainty, the rising stress, people are increasingly focusing on the present, focusing on today, focusing on what they can control. They are prioritizing their well-being, both mentally and physically, right? Both balance as well as physical fitness or exercise, mental health, financial security. That's really the priorities. And then they are finding strength in self-confidence and in adaptability across the board. So that brings you to what people are focusing on, which is maintaining good physical and good mental health, making practical career choices. I still want my work-life balance, but more importantly, I need a job first, and I want to prioritize higher pay and then the work-life balance. I'm less focused on my career fulfillment, right? So self-actualization has become less important with what's happened over the last 2 years. Or self-actualization as part of work. Because if I have the right work-life balance, then I can also self-actualize myself outside of work. So there's a balancing power here as well. Home is that place of emotional safety and is becoming increasingly important, continuing to do so. then I want to stand up for what's right, and I worry less about other people, what other people think in the first place, which allows me to be confident and stand up for what I think is right. I want to find connection in my local community rather than in the world at large. And again, sometimes that is a physical local community. Sometimes that is a social media community that cares about whatever that one activity is, that one hobby is that I really, really care about. And then in order to do all of those things, I surround myself with the right people who enable me to be confident, to stand up for what's right, to feel emotional safety in my home, and to prioritize what matters to me. So that is really all I have for you today. So thank you very much for your time and attention. As I said, there's a lot of depressing stuff in here, but really what we're seeing is that consumers across the world are living up to the challenges that they're seeing out there in the world, and are adapting. As a very adaptable people, we are living up to it, and we are getting there to figure out what it is consumers are dealing with. That brings me to some questions that some of you have entered here. So let me read that quickly. All right, perfect. Do I think COVID and lockdown had some positive benefits in that people learned life priorities, including the importance of home? I do. So I think it's very hard to talk about COVID as or something positive coming out of it, but there absolutely have been. I mean, there has also been a significant financial benefit to those people who continued to have employment through the COVID period. They have objectively put more money on the side because they couldn't spend it on anything else, right? So there's definitely a benefit there. Discovering the safety of the sanctuary of home is another benefit that's definitely come through here. And then thirdly, also, I would argue that as a as a world, we have figured out that remoteness does not need to cut you off from things. I realize that we are going back to an in-office world and in an in-person economy to a degree, but the fact nobody thought in 2019 that the world could continue to work as well as it did with everybody not leaving their house or with very, very few people leaving their houses, right? Companies continue to do business. TV shows continue to get made. And we figured out how to do that. And there's been a lot of benefits that have come through here that we are still taking advantage of. Now, many of those are being scaled back to a degree, but they are, there's elements that have come through. Again, not sure how comfortable we are with acknowledging all of that in a world where there's so much negativity around it and objective and accurate negativity around it, but some things have come through. Right. Next question. Yes. Yes, we really have met people who are traveling with their own pillow. We actually have that on video because we put together a nice little clip reel of how people were talking about home across a number of markets. So yes, we have absolutely met those consumers that are doing that. And it's not necessarily just pillows. Some people are traveling with their own, I don't know, some other bit that just gives them a bit of comfort, and various things, even if that is to a degree the pictures of your family in your wallet, or various degrees. All right. That was it for the questions that are in here. Are there any others? If not, I will hand it back to Karen to round us out and take us home.
Was fabulous, Christian. I always love your webinars. I always really enjoy. And I know there was some depressing stuff, but there was some really, really good stuff in there as well, wasn't there?
There,
It was
definitely. Well,
brilliant.
that's how
Thank
I
you.
choose to think about it, right? I don't want to let this
Yes.
depress me even more. So, yes.
No. No. And let's end on the good bits as well, hey. And I know somebody who takes her own pillow because she stuffs it with some of her clothes, and as it was one of those ones, because it's to get out of the Ryanair paying the Ryanair baggage fees then.
There
So
you go, right?
she does that, which is a clever idea. Very good idea. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending. And Christian, if anybody wants to have a copy of either the full presentation or some of it, is that possible?
Yes, I've actually posted that on LinkedIn somewhere, but yes, if anybody wants to, I'll happily send them the link.
Excellent.
Yes.
Perfect. So I've got one request for now, and then if anybody else wants, Christian, was your email address on there, wasn't it?
It was on there,
Oh,
but
it's
it is
yours.
christian.kurz@paramount.com. It's really not
That's
difficult.
it.
Yes.
That's it. Perfect. So thank you very much. It was fascinating as always.
Well,
And it was
thank
good to
you
see
for
you as
having
well.
me, and thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. See
Bye
ya.
bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.